Okay, so how do we get snow on top and always stay on top, even if we rotate our sphere, for instance? How do we make sure the snow only ever stays on top? So what we need is a couple of things for this. If we look at my uh, parameters for, let's just grab the ice here and open up that one. There's the one we're gonna, that I've built that's a lot more long-winded. So it looks like there's a lot going on, but what it has is this contrast, but this time I changed this name side contrast, the emissive multiplier, the normal, the roughness, and the texture size. So that's exactly what we've created so far, except now I have also duplicated it and I have it for the top as well. So I can control those settings separately for the top than I can the sides. I then have blend amounts that in sort of, I have two of them to sort of make it work nicely. Um, and the idea being here is that I can blend it from the top to the sides and different amounts, sort of a different transition amount and whatnot for any given material instance. I can play with that. I've also included opacities in this one, but we're not going to get into that. That takes having to actually change the shading model. So going down here and changing the blend mode and whatnot to be able to allow those to come available to us, because they won't do anything as they are right now. So because the model won't actually allow it. And what I mean by that is if you look here, the opacity is grayed out. You actually have to change other things in the shader to be able to get to it. But we'll get back to that in a minute. So with this then, I have, you know, bit of blending we've got to do on top here. So I'm just going to pull this down, maybe that, like that. And I'm going to redo some naming here. I'm going to call this side contrast. And I'm going to call this side roughness. And we're going to call this side emissive. And we're going to call this side texture size. And side normal. I think that's all of them. Yeah. So now that we have those, what we want to be able to do is blend in another texture on top of sort of, it's going to be, you could think of it as just straight up Photoshop layer on top with a spinner to be able to control its blend amount from the top layer to the bottom layer. This is going to become the bottom layer in a sense, except we're not going to blend it just with a straight up, sort of transparency. We're going to use the direction the normals point on the surface. So that's the direction the surface points to actually be able to control that. So what we're going to need is another one of these world lines. So if you select something, I can even select both of these and put my mouse up here, go Control W. It'll copy them to where your mouse is, or you can go Control C, Control V if you want, but that's more work. This one I'm going to change to my snow. And I have my snow D texture here. So now I've got my snow. I'm going to need texture sizes for those, for the snow. So I'm going to go in and again, hold down one and click, right click and convert to parameter. And we're going to call this top texture size. And we're just going to worry about it and not the normal for the moment. And for that reason, I'm actually going to unplug the normal. Okay. And I'm unplugging the normal because I don't want to see this in it while I make this work up here. So we have to do something that's called lerping. Lerp. So that's L on the keyboard, hold it down, look for a lerp node, okay? So just hold down L and left click, it'll create a lerp. And all lerp is short form for is linear interpolation. That is what it is when you're in Photoshop and you take a layer and give it an opacity of 50%. You're just simply lerping the two images together, the top layer and the bottom layer together. It's a linear interpolation of the colors together. Simple as that. So we're going to plug these together. Now we're going to use, even though this is just going to be the top, we're going to use the XYZ as well, okay, and the XYZ here, okay, and we're going to take it with the cheap contrast, and we're going to plug that in. Now these are side roughness, and so we're going to have to plug all this in as well eventually. So I'm going to get rid of these for the moment so we can come back to making this work. But I'm going to take the contrast out of the contrast and plug it in. So if I can control the contrast of the sides, maybe I want to be able to control the contrast here. Same thing. So let's just plug that in and plug that in. And I'm going to change this to top contrast. Make sure you change these names. If they're named the same, it'll take whichever one was first, I believe, and you don't see the other one. So they've got to have different names. So now that these are lerped together and I plug these in, so you see I can't see anything else, and I hit apply, what we're seeing here in this sphere, it's kind of hard to see it because they're both light colors, but what we're actually seeing is 50% of each because the blend is one of the others. So on 0, okay, we see one texture, and on 1, we're going to see the other. So at 1, we're seeing all of this bottom texture. At 0, we're seeing all of this top texture. So we want to be able to control that. Sorry, the size here should be 100. There we go. Now we can see it better. The default size for this, make sure it's set to 100 by default. So there it is there. So if we go back to our lerp and we take our lerp down to 0.5, there's a 50-50 of them. 0 is all the snow, 1 is all the ice, okay? But we want to, that's this alpha value here. We can't just stick a float value in there and play with it because it's just going to blend it overall. We need to find a way to be able to blend it based on the angle of the surface and the direction it's pointing. So I'm going to right click and we're going to say normal, just forgot the name of it. We want the world aligned normal, world align normal, world align normal. No, that's not it. Losing my mind. Vertex. There it is. Sorry. Vertex normal WS. Okay. And what this does is it returns in WS world space. Okay. It returns which direction the face is pointing. So it's going to return a vector. Remember the old Cartesian graph days where you had to go and plot a point on a Cartesian graph, right? You know, well, all the entire world space is of any 3D application is one gigantic three-dimensional world, one Cartesian graph. So what this is going to produce, if it points up, it's going to produce a point that points up on our graph. Okay, in this case, it's Z up, so it's going to be, you know, the value would be 0 for X, 0 for Y, 1 for Z, and that is pointing up. If it was pointing along the X-axis, for instance, it would be 1, 0, 0, okay? And then if it's on an angle, it'll be something else. And it's always what's called normalized. In other words, the value, the length of that pointer is never longer than 1. Okay, so if you measured it out from the center. Quick little learning thing for you. So that's what this is returning for us, is that world space normal and where it's pointing. So if I take the world space normal, and I plug it in. Well, this is X, Y, and Z. What we're worried about is just Z, actually. And so we're going to pull the Z axis out of this. And if you use, sorry, totally forgot. I changed the way I did it before, so let's go with the way I did it because it worked better. And it's a little bit funkier with some of the math. So this is where they're going. We want to create a vector value, which is a RGB XYZ value, and that's 3 on the keyboard and left click. And it's a color value for all intents and purposes, except we're going to make a value on our Cartesian graph that points directly up, 0, 0, 1. RGB, XYZ, UVW, however you want to read these. Doesn't matter that it says RGB here. It's just a number, So who cares? It makes a color that's blue, but it really doesn't matter to the software. It's a number, okay? So this points up on our Cartesian graph. This one's getting them that are pointing in all directions. And the next thing we want to get is something called dot or dot product, okay, is what we're looking for. So the dot product of two vectors, how do you explain this one? So if we have our Cartesian graph and we have one vector pointing up, that's this one here, always just staying pointing up. And then we have this one here, which could be pointing in any direction depending on the direction. If it too is pointing up as in the same place, it's going to return, dot product will return a value of 1. If the vertex normal is pointing straight down, it'll actually return a value of -1. If it's at a right angle, either way, it's going to return a value of 0, okay, compared to this one. And if it's at some other angle, it'll be some number in between these two. So that's what dot product is going to give us. It's what it's going to feed out to us. So we want to use this dot product then, and we want to be able to take the dot product of these. So this is going to give us this angle change, and we want to blend them together with it. So if you notice now, it's snow on the bottom and ice on the top. Okay, so it's actually blending them together, opposite order that we want, but it is doing it nonetheless. We could flip these two over to do it, and we could invert those two. That should get you the correct result, or else we can do again a 1 minus node that we've already used and plug it in and flip the number over there, and we'll end up with snow on top and ice on the bottom. So that is now blending those two together correctly because it's outputting those values. Now, something we also want to do is we want to make sure that we use something called a saturate and force the values to always between a value of 0 and 1. And that's a saturate node, believe it or not. Why it's a saturate node, but it's the cheapest way to do it. Okay, we take a look at it, it'll clamps a value between 0 and 1. So we won't get a negative value here. Okay, we won't get a -1, which the dot product would have. It'll clamp it off. Anything below 0 is just 0. Okay, so we can keep that on there. So let's just check that out. So we should have now snow on the top. How about that? And if we start to rotate this, you'll see that the snow slowly slides over and onto the other side. Isn't that cool? It just starts revealing it. So if we put it on an angle like this, we'll start getting a mix of the two, and it'll be mixing the two on these sides here. Okay, and so you can see the sphere, same thing, appears to stay put. So now we need to be able to control this blend. We can see it on the sphere. Obviously, the box is a real hard blend, but this is a nice soft blend. We want to, because the angle of the sides changes slowly. We want to be able to control that and effectively make sure it goes up and down a little sort of harsher. So what we can do then, I'm going to leave the saturate in there, and after our 1 minus, I think, yeah, probably a good idea, I'm going to use a multiply. So that's M and an A for add, and I'm going to plug these in here. So we're going to be able to multiply it, and then we're going to be able to add to it. So the multiply will multiply this value. And so we can basically spread this out. You can make that value go up and down even further than 0 to 1 to -1. If we can push it further. And I'm going to say convert to parameter, and we're going to say blend. I'll just call it blend multi, and I'm going to set the default to 1 because we're multiplying it. Get the default, just stay where we are. It'll get it. Multiply something by 1. It is whatever the value is. The add, we're going to plug that in, and we are going to convert to parameter again, and we're going to call this blend, maybe just blend add. And if you're going to add to something and you want it to stay the same, add 0 to it. Makes sense? So now when we come back, it should be exactly the same. Let's take a look at our blend values here that we've got now. So we've got this blend add and blend multiply. So we can go ahead and you can see that it's changing up the side. So you can see as I multiply it up, it's pushing it up further. If I start playing with the add, I can kind of pull it back down again, but you'll see the blend line is harsher as I do that. So you can see it's now blending harsher and harsher. So it becomes this harder and harder value. So as I move it up and down. So there's the blend sort of point, okay? And there's how soft it is. So you could change them to blend softness and whatever, blend angle if you wanted. So there you go. I can now mix that up and down. Now at some point, it's going to blend and overlap. So take those, and if I take this down to 0, you'll notice that it becomes all of the snow. And if I take the offset, the blend add, sorry, it becomes all of the ice. So I can choose one or the other still at this point, and then be playing around with my other values and whatnot, contrasts and other values. But I got to plug those back in again. So back here, then what we want to do is take a look at how we want to plug these in. We need to really have these blended together. So we've got this roughness, but we don't want the roughness affecting the top from the side. We need more of these lerp nodes to lerp some of this stuff together. So I'm just going to plug a lerp in here and here. These are going to be the second ones. So this is coming out of this, the ice, right? So, and it went into the second, we're going to go into the second. We're going to blend it together with the exact same system that we've generated here. But now we want to plug this one in, okay, and lerp these together. But again, we might want to do the exact same thing here and multiply these, have some way of multiplying them up and down so that we can play around with the side roughness and whatnot. So again, nice and simple. We need a multiply node, and we need a constant, and we're going to call this top roughness. And we're going to plug that into the roughness. So we'll be able to control both of them now. Default this to 1 again, and then same thing's going to happen down here. We're going to have our lerp node, but we're going to need a multiply again here. And we're going to plug that into the multiply down into the A channel, constant, and we're going to say parameter, and we're top, what was this again? Top emissive, and that gets plugged into the emissive. So the next one is going to be the flat normals. So we need to just duplicate all of this. I'm just going to duplicate it above, and because we need to use this one here with the normal, so Control W, and we're going to change this over to the snow, and so it'll be the snow normal, and we're going to call this to top normal, and we're going to blend these together exactly the same way, lerp them together, and we're going to use the exact same saturate, and then we're going to plug that into the normal. So there's the flow. Boy, it looks complicated, but realistically, when you break it down, it's not that bad if you just follow it through and take your time going through it and trying to understand the parts. So now I have all of these different settings. I can now play with all sorts of things. So let's just default these back, and I'm going to multiply that up and just pull that down. And so you can see now that it looks like the texture size, I can't see it for some reason, normal amount, there it is. And we have our texture size, and it's not plugged in properly because it's not working. So we need to use the same texture size up here for this one. There we go, that should work. So texture size, normal amount, roughness, let's make it shiny. maybe a little bit of emissive on there. You've now got the same texture running as I do. Play around with the settings and you end up with ice with snow on top of it if you want it. Don't want ice with snow on top of it, make another material instance of the material and set it up so that it doesn't have it if it doesn't need it all. And that's what I've done for these, is I've then set up some opacities and stuff. That's a whole other ball of wax. We'll get into that if need be. But the ground has even got the same one, the ice on the ground, but it's a different material instance and it doesn't show the snow on top. So I've been able to turn that off, and so I've got snow on there. Nice, huh? There you go. Snow and ice shader for you.